All right, the purpose of this screencast is to talk about how we select or identify a number of variables to be analyzed in a data set, or put another way, oftentimes what we'll find if we're using an omnibus survey, which is a whole bunch of little surveys thrown together, or if we're working with a Pew Global Attitude Survey, or many of the Latino Barometer or other surveys, we can find that we've got instances where people in the survey have been asked hundreds of questions, and if you've been asked hundreds of questions, when you go to analyze your data, that means that you'll have hundreds of variables that you're going to have to dig through. And just for the purposes of speeding everything up, oftentimes it makes sense with the data set, if you can, to eliminate most of the variables that you're not going to analyze so they don't get in your way in the point and click. And so let's go ahead and show you how to do that. I'm going to go ahead and open up a syntax file that I made earlier, and so double click on that. So once the file is open, you can see, because I opened in the syntax file, I've got a blank SPSS data editor window, and we've got to go ahead and tell SPSS to get the original data set that I'm going to be analyzing, and then the plan was to save it as a working file. So this one starts off with July. I saved it, adding the word working, and so what this means is we'll be messing with the data set that's not the original, and we'll be working with this working one. So let me get and save that working file. And I showed you how to do that on a previous video if you're just joining midstream, as it were. Okay, so we go down to the working data set here, and as you can see, we've got 60-some variables, and here's the mess that this can create for us. Let's say that we want to look at descriptive statistics, so we want to look at frequencies. So we go to the frequency, and if I want to do party identification, for example, look at all this mess. I got 60 variables that I have to work through. If this was a global attitude survey that had multiple countries in it, we could have hundreds of variables, and it's just hard to keep track of this. And so what we want to do is to eliminate the number of variables that we've got to deal with. And so what we're going to do is tell our SPSS, get me that original data set, and we're going to ask it to save an out file for us, but when we ask it to save that out file, what we're going to do is we're going to ask it not only to save that out file for us, but we're going to ask it to remove a number of variables for us. And so let me show you what that looks like. We'll go back to File. Not to file, rather. Yes, to file. Save as, and it's important to note this has to be done in the data editor because I'm saving the data. If I try to do this in the syntax, as you can see, if I do save as, it's just going to try to save the syntax file. So I've got to save the data file. So I'm going to go to Save As, and I'm going to want to save this as the working file, so I'm going to touch that and change the name of it here. But the key idea over here is I'm going to go to Variables. And I know this is going to be counterintuitive, but at least this current version of SPSS, despite offering this, will not save your data removing variables if you do it in the way that seems most intuitive. So we're going to do it in an unintuitive way. I'm going to ask SPSS to drop all of the variables. Now, that obviously is not what we really want. I could say keep all of the variables, in which case we get the same data set that we've got now. But we're going to trick SPSS here. You'll notice that I dropped all the variables and then I did keep all the variables, so now every variable is checked. And what I want to do here is unselect every variable that I actually want to keep. So in this case, I'm going to start off by just showing you the only variable that we're going to keep is the unique ID, which is the number that was given to every person who took the survey. I'll show you how to add additional variables in a minute, but let me just show you working from here. We hit continue, and everything looks good. We're still saved as a working file. I'm going to paste this into my syntax file. So now my syntax file, before it had just save, so get my original file and save me as a working file, now I've got an alternative save file, and what it says is save the out file and drop just this variable. Now you recall this was the one that I wanted to keep, right? So now what are we going to do? We're going to change this to keep, and there we have it. So instead of saving the out file, I'm now going to save the alpha. So I'm going to cut and paste this right over the top. So now what I've got is get the original file, save only this variable, and then get that file that I just saved, that, let me get you, working file, get that file and open it back up. So let's go ahead and run it. And if I go down here and I get the working file, you find that I've only got one variable. And you might say, I wanted more than one variable. Sure you did, but now you've got the code that you need in order to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and save. I could hit Control S, but because you can't see that, I'll go ahead and save it. Now if I want to add additional variables, I could type them in manually. I could use the code book, but boy, I could run into all kinds of problems with typos if I do that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to open that original Pew data set, and I'm going to go down here, and I can see it's the July 24th, not the working file, so I've got the right one. And now I can identify variables that I think are interesting. So let's say that I want gender. I'm going to Control-C copy that. I could go up there, but I'm going to Control-C copy it. And we're going to do that one, and so on. In order to have a better quick eyeballing what I'm putting in and what I'm not, age, I can go ahead and just space them this way too. Whoa, what a mess. All right, because I copied the whole line. So we'll just copy that, and we'll paste it. Okay. So now here I've got get my original file, keep certain variables, and then get that new and improved file. So I'm going to save this. Oops, cancel. I'm saving my syntax. Just hit Control S. All right, let's run it. And if I go down to working now, I've got the 3 variables that I added. And as you could tell, I could keep on going from there too, right? Same deal, where I go back and I say, wait a minute, I want to add additional ones. I go back, run that again, and now it's going to have opened up the original data set for me. And let's add education as something that we care about. Let's do race as something we care about. And again, now I run the whole file. And if we go down to working file, what we're going to find is now it's got my 5 variables. So now watch what happens when I go to analyze descriptive statistics and frequencies. Now I'm only going to have to go through a handful of variables, which are the ones that I really care about. And so from there I can begin my recoding, and it's going to be easier to get through my data. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up. I'm going to save my syntax, so I'm Control-S-ing, but I can go up here if I want to. It's not letting me save it because it's already saved, but I'm going to Control-S and I'm going to save it. And at this point I can open or close my syntax. I can close the data and close the output. Don't need to save that. Now, next time I come to my computer and I reopen it again, I'm just going to pull up that syntax file. Notice I'm not clicking on the data. And it will go ahead and open up for me. And from there, all I've got to do is select the whole thing, run it, and my working data just has the variables in that I want it. So that is how you trim a data set so that it's only got the variables that you want in it. Now, if I did a bunch of recoding and I added additional variables, so for example, race here says I might recode a variable so that I had one where it was 1 equals white, 0 equals something else, another one where it was 1 equals African American, 0 equals something else. If I created a bunch of variables and wanted to drop race later on, I can use the same language in the syntax later on, where I can save the file again and just keep the variables that I've added. And so that is one way that I can keep the overall number of data, or rather variables, in this data set manageable. And so I'm going to stop there, and I hope this was helpful.